Hi, everybody. I think we're going to begin. Thank you all for coming to English Department Career Day. This is the second panel of the day. My name is Nick Taylor, and I'm a professor in the English Department. And along with Marta Walian of the Poets and Writers Coalition, I organized this event. And I decided to divide the day into two different panels. We did one on work in technology this morning, and we're going to do one now on work in publishing. And I wanted to say as a kind of caveat that there are many more avenues available to students in the humanities and communications fields than just technology and publishing. But we did a career day a few years ago and focused on other things, nonprofits and education and other kinds of corporate work. And so I felt like it would be better to focus narrowly and do a couple of things in detail than to try to rehash a resume workshop or something that you might get from the Career Center. So I've asked a panel of San Jose State grads and friends to take time out of their day and come speak to you guys about what it is they do in the publishing industry. And as you'll soon learn, it's hard to talk about the publishing industry as just one industry because it's, especially lately, become many different kinds of things. And we may talk a little bit later about what it is we think that unites all of these different enterprises. But first, I just wanted to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and to talk about what it is they do at work. So we'll start on your right, our left, with Daniel Garcia, who is the editor of Content Magazine here in San Jose. And then we'll move on to Jennifer de Guzman, who is a BA and MFA grad of San Jose State, and who works for Image Comics in Berkeley. Then Mitchell Parker, who is a graduate of San Jose State. I think you were an English major too, right?
Journalism.
Journalism. Perfect. English by another name.
Working is what it's called.
And working as a journalist. Mitchell is the editor of Austin Home magazine. And to his right, your left, we have Rob James, who is an MFA grad from San Jose State and a teacher and also an author. And he has a very interesting author story well, he brought some copies of his books as well, so that we'll be able to check that out. I didn't want to stock the panel with just authors, but I thought that Rob's story was unique enough that...
Making an exception for me?
Huh?
You made an exception for me?
I'm actually elevating you because, you know, I could have had a bunch of poets on this panel, but you know what I'm saying? So, to his right is Ed Sams, who is a publisher of Yellow Tulip Press. And I think we'll start with Daniel.
Okay. Hello. It's nice to be here. Good to see you all. I actually don't call myself a publisher or editor. I call myself a cultivator because I'm actually a photographer and started Content Magazine kind of as a passion to do something different in the publishing realm here in San Jose. And so I don't really think that I don't have the schooling and the education and the experience to call myself a publisher or an editor. So I invented a term. Since I'm inventing a magazine, might as well just invent a term for myself too, right? So I'm the cultivator, and I think that really kind of defines what I do in the publishing realm. That's I cultivate. I'm kind of like the creative director and kind of like the glue and bring all the stuff together. So on a daily basis, it's kind of like project management, dealing with the writers, dealing with the advertising, dealing with the distribution, and working with the different teams to basically make that happen. You want more?
Why don't you tell us a little bit about content?
Yeah, okay, so Content Magazine is basically we're trying to focus on the creative and innovative culture of San Jose. It could be called a lifestyle magazine, except for I personally don't like lifestyle magazines. They're kind of too commercialized and like look at these nice shoes and that kind of stuff, or celebrities. And so what we're trying to do is really show like the personalities and the people and profile the people of San Jose. A little term that I've kind of coined and I've kind of heard is that San Jose is like the garage town. It's where if you open up somebody's garage, they're after work, they're inventing and they're creating, they're doing their hobby, and they have their passions and their dreams. And so we're trying to like kind of open up the garage doors and show what is going on. And as you kind of like pick up the different rocks here in town, you start to find out all these great things that San Jose is connected with in innovation and creativity. So that's kind of like what we're doing, from artists to entrepreneurs to celebrities to whoever, local people. We really want to tell the story. For us, it's kind of like behind everything is a person. You see the chairs in this room. Somebody set the chairs up, and so I'm just like a curious person. I'm like, who is that person? What makes them tick? What's their passions? What do they do? And so that's kind of what we're about.
All right.
Nice.
Is it a quarterly?
It's bi-monthly.
Bi-monthly.
Yeah. So
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Jennifer. I work at Image Comics, which is up in Berkeley. We publish The Walking Dead is our biggest title, and many other comics, including some by names like Brian K. Vaughan and Brian Wood, and other lesser known comics that are creators. There are a variety of genres, from horror, science fiction, fantasy, slice of life. Just anything that catches our publisher's eye and that he likes. I'm the public relations and marketing director there. Previously, I was the editor-in-chief at Slave Labor Graphics here in San Jose for 10 years. So I've worked on the editing side in comics as well as the marketing side. I kind of did a little bit of both at Slave Labor Graphics because it's such a small company. But what I do is just try to make people aware of the books that we publish. So I work with the media to set up stories, I write press releases, I arrange interviews, I send out review copies, I interact with reviewers and writers and just pitch. It's kind of, I always say it's kind of, because I used to work as a freelance writer as well in comics, and it's kind of like that, except you don't have to write the story you pitch. Somebody else can do it for you, so you just can send something off to an editor and say, hey, we have this great new book coming out, this is the interesting angle on it, would you like to do a story on it? I'll arrange an interview with the creator, and then they do it. I don't have to, so that's nice. So it's fairly not only kind of intensive with writing, with the press releases and corresponding with people, but also very social. You have to interact a lot with many people.
Do you do any work with the show, The Walking Dead?
Oh, no.
Right, because I'm just having
separate.
a total fan moment right here. I'm about to...
I mean, we kind of...
Can you introduce me to anybody involved with The Walking Dead?
Let me go to the premiere, please.
I got to go to the Black Carpet event at San Diego this year. That was fun. I met Stephen Yoon, who plays Glenn.
Right.
And yeah, that was interesting. So yeah, be an English major, you can meet TV stars.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really what it's all about.
And also Orlando Bloom was there for some reason.
So my name is Mitchell. I am the editor of Austin Home Magazine. I understand that we are nowhere near Austin at the moment, but I run the magazine remotely from the Bay Area. Over the summer I moved back to the Bay Area and I quit my job, and they begged me to keep doing it. So now in kind of a convergence of what probably was discussed at the last panel with technology and publishing, I'm able to do my job in my PJs from my sofa. Which I was telling Daniel earlier, this is the most dressed up I've been in 3 months.
Lucky us.
Yeah. So I am responsible for the, I guess, conception, execution, and management of all editorial content in Austin Home Magazine. Austin Home Magazine covers the local, obviously, home and design community in Austin, Texas. This is architects, interior designers, furniture makers, people who make chairs, like things in here. Just the whole creative community that's centered around design, and architecture, mostly just residential. It is a quarterly magazine with a shoestring budget, which is very normal nowadays, but I rely on freelancers, and I have to write a lot of the content myself, including, managing photo shoots and writing photo captions and headlines and feature articles and small little blurbs and editing, freelancers' submissions that come in and that kind of stuff. Pretty much it's just me. I share an art department with Austin Monthly magazine, so I'm kind of just flying solo most of the time and relying on freelancers and interns, and once my budget gets tapped out, then I have to write everything else myself, which is unfortunate, but it's just how it is. I think that's it.
All right. So I'm Rob James, and I don't really have a title, but for lack of a better term, I'm the book editor for Field and Stream magazine and Outdoor Life magazine, which are two titles that are they're co-branded under the same. They're owned by the same publishing conglomerate. They're owned by a publishing house called Bonnier out of Australia that a few years ago bought several different publishing entities, and one that they bought is a book publisher called Weldon Owen out of San Francisco. And because Field and Stream and Outdoor Life are owned by Bonnier Corporation and Weldon Owen is owned by Bonnier Corporation, somebody had the brilliant idea of putting the two together and seeing if they could take the magazine content and take out some of that the time-sensitive material that you have in a monthly publication and edit that down into, for lack of a better term, a manual. Something that is 250 to 500 words per entry, 4 entries per spread, and sort of a souped-up coffee table book. And the first one that they did was the Total Outdoorsman Manual, and they actually wrote all of the content inside without any help from Field and Stream, and then approached Field and Stream afterward and said, is it possible, here's what we've got, would you be willing to put your brand on it? And they did, and then it became wildly successful. And when it became wildly successful, the higher-ups said, oh, well, we need to do more of those types of manuals. And they needed an editor. And they didn't have anybody, as you can imagine, in San Francisco. There's not a lot of outdoorsmen, not a lot of hunters, fishermen, people who own guns and shoot them regularly, at least in a legal sense. And about 10 years ago, as an MFA student here, I had, just through a complete fluke at somebody's house party carving pumpkins over a Halloween, started talking to this person who was ends up being one of the executive editors at Weldon Owen, and I said that I was always looking for freelance work. I think as most English majors probably always are. And she said, well, we're always looking for proofreaders. And I said, I would love to proofread. And so the very first thing that I did about 10 years ago was proofread a book that had been translated from. It had been originally published in Finland, and it was 10 Ways to Save the Planet. And it was a little book about just 10 ideas that this guy had to save the planet, and I got paid market rate for proofreading, which was, it was a 10-hour job, and I got paid $20 an hour. And it took me 5 hours to do that. And I said, I can't bill for 20. I only did 5. And she said, well, it's budgeted for 20. How about you just bill for 15? And I said, okay, I'll bill for 15 if I get the next proofreading job. And she said, okay, that sounds like a deal. And so I got the next proofreading job, and long story short, they have, there's just tiers of editors within this. They're a very traditional kind of old style publishing house. You have proofreaders, you have copy editors, you have developmental editors, you have project editors, you have senior editors, and the senior editor is up here basically not doing any of the work. And it's the project editor who coordinates everything, works with the authors, ends up writing everything that the author says. I have no idea how to write that. So I started off as a proofreader, became a copy editor, became a developmental editor, which has the authority to go into the actual hard copy on on the server and change the sentence structure, change things around and edit things to fit. And then I literally woke up one morning a year and a half ago, and I had an email from that one person who I had been working with for 10 years, and she said, "You grew up in the Midwest, and I know you hunt and fish. Do you think you know enough to help us with a survival manual?" And I lied and said, "Absolutely, I can do that." And so I went in, and that was the second title that they had done, and it was. They didn't have an author for a long time, and so I ended up working a lot to generate content. And so in addition to being the project editor, coordinating everything, I got a with title on that one. And so that's how I ended up being an author and editor for Field and Stream. And you know, they figured out that this manual, you know, they're not ever going to make money writing traditional style books and publishing traditional style books. So this is sort of a marriage of that traditional book and the book that your dad or grandpa probably had in a bathroom somewhere. And you know, they've updated it, they've made it much more graphic intensive. But you know, we do a lot with content as well, you know, generating that content. And now I'm hooked into it. There's nobody else who can do it. They don't have anybody else up there, and it's steady employment, which I'm not ever going to argue with. So, you know, I do anywhere from 2 to 3 titles. So currently,
A year?
Yeah. So we had the survival manual debuted at number 5 on the Nielsen bestseller list for outdoor rec, and is now up to number 2. The gun manual debuted higher than that. I'm not entirely sure where that is now. And currently I'm writing a fishing, the total fishing manual, which I don't like. It's hard to do. And I'm also writing the total guide to deer hunting. And I don't know what the next 2 titles are going to be, but they have another 5 or 6 in the pipeline somewhere. So once we get finished with these 2, then I'll move on to those.
I'm Ed Sams, and my wife and I own the Yellow Tulip Press. We've been in business for 20 years, and it's a desktop publishing outfit in the small press tradition of Americana, and also in the tradition of the underground newspaper as well. 20 years ago, I lost my full-time job in education due to a recession. Close to 1,000 teachers in California were let go. And it was impossible to find work in my field. And my wife said, there are no slaves, only slave mentality. And so we started our own business. In 1992 was the centenary of the Fall River murders. And I thought there might be some interest in Lizzie Borden. So this was our first book, Lizzie Borden Unlocked, and we're still selling copies of it. Now, we go cheap. That's our aesthetic. We go as cheap as possible, but there's a huge markup if you go cheap, and people are willing to buy at a reasonable rate. So we started with Lizzie Borden Unlocked, and this was in '92, so this was really before the internet got started. So we floundered for around 4 years, but we would go to the Alternative Press Expo, and we'd see slave labor graphics there, slug, and it started out in San Jose at the Tech Museum. And then it moved to San Francisco, where it is now. So that was our big festival where we would sell our books. And we started out with just a few titles. We would do a title or 2 a year. And we did things like Victoria's Dark Secrets. She was a vampire. That was her secret. Now, all of these are researched. What I've done is gotten people to pay for my research papers that I learned how to do in English 1B. So if you're taking English 1B, off on it if you have the right subject.
Better don't do that.
We've had several reviews. Let's see. This one, The Real Mountain Charlie, this is Californiana, but we were reviewed in Holy Tit Clamps magazine. And I'm so proud of that title. I've been a little afraid to get a copy of it, but still. And then, let's see, we got a good review for Lovecraft's Terrifying Escape and the Kimball family's acting secret in Notebook. And Notebook is a small press out of Berkeley. We sell to schools and universities and libraries and a lot of lonely people around the world. That's the sense I get. In 1996, we created a website. My wife is really good at web design. And then our sales began to pick up. We just had a lot of fun with it. We have polls on who's your favorite character in the Yellow Tulip Press. And, we had an advice column that was run by our fake centenarian. We had a woman who was 100 years old who would answer any question you had. Sometimes I would pretend to be Sue Ellen, other times my wife would pretend to be Sue Ellen. We didn't really work hard because we enjoyed what we did. Here's one that we collaborated together. It's the Orwellian Mother Goose. Its time really hasn't come yet, but we've taken all of the occasional verse in Orwell's novels and essays and turned them into a Mother Goose miscellany.
That's awesome. So, I'm taking this one home.
And, let's see. So we have, sometimes we deal with literary characters. Poe's uncanny house cat. He had a house cat that appears in his biographies and seemed to have influenced his writing. The Ghost of Oscar Wilde, for instance. Houdini's Red Magic. This is one of my wives, a local one, Mrs. Winchester's Windows, interpreting the two enigmatic windows of the Winchester house and what they might mean, how that affects her life story. And then this is one that we did for the anniversary of the San Francisco earthquake. The ghouls of the San Francisco earthquake. It was supposed to be a hot concept, but the more research I did, the more circumstantial evidence I found. Well, anyway, that's a different story. But in 1999, we were invited to Lincoln Center to speak at the premiere of the opera Lizzie Borden, because the dramaturg liked our interpretation. She found us on the web. And then in 2004, San Jose Museum honored us, among a lot of other people, with the Art of the Zine. And we got free tickets, and there was a host bar, so it was like being doubly honored. And then recently, we've started putting our chat books on, that's what they are, chat books. Chat book meaning cheap book. Cheap is our aesthetic, you understand. We could go big, but no, we like staying small. We went on Amazon, and so we get money in the mail. Now, the point of a business is never to show a profit, but once you go on Amazon, there's no upkeep. I mean, it's there, so no postage, no paper. You just cash the checks when you come in. So you're talking about the future of publishing.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
That's a perfect segue to my first question. Thank you, everyone. The question is, I'm sure burning on everyone's mind, which is, everything we hear is that the publishing industry is dying, that it's going away, and that Amazon's eating it all up, or Apple's eating it all up, or people aren't reading, or whatever it is. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that as people who are actively making your living in the publishing industry. How is that possible?
I think my situation is unique because the comic book industry is also a collector's industry. So people want physical copies. And it's also art, and people like to have art on paper, whereas words, whichever medium you consume it by, they're still the same words, but there's a little difference with art and having it on paper. But we also sell a lot of digital comics. About 10% of sales are digital sales. People buy them on their iPhones or their iPads, their computers, and so that's part of it as well. But yeah, the collector aspect of comics kind of ensures that print stays a part of it. And then there's three different formats it, because comics come first in the little comic books. They're like a chapter of a novel, and then we collect them together into a book, and that sells as well. And then there's the electronic. So you're selling the same material 3 times, which is something I learned in the MFA program in the materials and methods of literary production. You use every idea 3 times, and so this is just different mediums, and but you can also apply it to using it in different ways if you're a freelancer, but still.
Yeah, I don't think people are reading less. I think people are reading differently. And we'll do the same thing with this, for instance. The gun manual is broken down into two halves. The first half is all on rifles. Second half is all on shotguns, and then we'll break that out, and they'll sell this as a smaller version, and there'll be a shotgun specific, and it's the same thing that you have here in this book, but you're selling it as 2 different entities. This is broken into 4 different sections from camping, fishing, hunting, and survival, and they'll break those out, and they'll sell shorter manuals from those. They make they target, it's Father's Day, so we want to have all our titles out by Father's Day, because it's the kind of thing that you buy Dad when you've got $20. But when you look across here, there's still, for me, I'm never going to get tired of picking up a book and reading a book. I will still, when you walk by a magazine like this, you're going to pick that up because it calls to you, and there's that tactile nature of it is there. So just because publishing has expanded to include so many different media doesn't mean there's less publishing. I think you see some with Penguin and Random House converging. I think you see a consolidation among some particular avenues, like the traditional novel, traditional book. I think you see some of that, but I think you also have, at the same time, you have this expanding market, and you have some very savvy marketing people in the publishing industry who are much more adept than I am, who say, okay, how can we capitalize on this niche? And this is a niche, that is a niche, this is a niche, and everybody then is I think, honing their craft in that particular venue, and then and people are finding those venues, and so I think it's successful. It's just more dispersed across the board.
Yeah, I would say it's not dying, but evolving. And the idea that people aren't reading as much as before. Every time I look around, somebody has their head buried in their phone. What are they looking at? Pictures? No, they're probably reading words that are on that little screen. 10 or 15 years ago, I didn't see people, bumping into people in the hall because they were trying to read books, or like standing on an elevator and reading a book. I feel like I see people engaging more with words. It's just how they're getting at those words, and somebody has to write those words. So I think it's an interesting time for a writer. I just think the whole hoopla over the publishing industry happened with the narrative being that it's dying, but it's really changing, and the people that are a part of it are kind of getting forced into these different avenues that when they got involved in the industry, that's not what they had in mind. I know when I was in journalism school here, it was just the start of this whole convergence media stuff. When I wanted to go into journalism school, I wasn't thinking, oh, I also want to be I want to be a web designer and a videographer and make slideshows and do audio editing. I just wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a writer. But then all of a sudden, there's all this confusion in the publishing world, and you're expected to take up these things. I get a sense that it's kind of dying down a little bit, and those specific roles are branching off, and you can still find an avenue where you know those other things, but you can still just be the writer if that's what you want to be, or you can be the videographer or the web designer, and it's kind of, I feel like, spreading out a little bit more and kind of settling down. We're nowhere near a settlement point, but I feel like it's kind of calming down a bit.
Yeah, and for us, we want to celebrate the whole idea of the tangible print. Because we think that we live in a real world, and you touch things, you want to feel them, you want to see them. So we're trying to continually try to do something that's aesthetically pleasing, to hold, to touch, to smell, you know, to engage with. But at the same time, like you're saying, is like your menu of what you have to offer. Like I never even dreamed of this going into things. Like, oh, let's do a print magazine. But then of course you have all the digital kind of assets that you can do, which are great actually, because they can actually turn into other means of revenue and options for advertisers. So which is good, because at the end of the day, we got to make money in order to be able to produce the product that we love to do. So those gives us kind of more tools to use, even though I would say in general, it seems like the whole industry's kind of dropped in how much dollars are probably being spent across the board. It's just been kind of spread out. You know, so we have some people that are like, why are you doing a print magazine? And the other people are like, oh, I'm so glad you're doing a print magazine. I hope you're not going to do digital, right? Then I have people come up to me saying, why are you doing print? Because of, you know, the ecology and the, you know, how can you use paper during this time? And, you know, so everybody has like kind of like a different opinion. And so for us, we want to celebrate that when we put somebody in print and we talk about their story, it becomes almost like a historical piece that's memorialized and kept forever. And hopefully people have stacks of them on their table and on their bookshelves, and that they'll go back and they need inspiration for writing or for graphics, and they'll pick it up. So that's what we're trying. That's like our niche, and I think that's the thing is, print's not dying. It's just bad print, right? Dying. I mean, that's what's going on. I mean, the news is suffering because, quite honestly, the turnaround time has kind of cut the quality of writing. So nobody's gonna buy that. I'll just look quickly on my phone or my device. But you see that there's great desire for publications that are writing well, right?
I read last year that there were more books published online than published in print. But you got to consider that in the past 4 years we went through a very deep depression. 2010, nobody was buying anything from us, and also a lot of small publishing houses weren't presenting new titles. It was just because of the contraction of the market. Books have been overpriced for years, and in the 90s we had just one loaded series of books after another. When we went to Lincoln Center, we were approached by Barnes & Noble to take this little thing and turn it into a book that they would sell. We would pay for the startup cost. They wanted something perfect bound, plenty of pictures, same amount of a copy, but just in a much thicker book where they could charge a much larger price. We go cheap. We don't like that. So we kept to this. But this was also when there was this artisanal phase. Everyone was into what was artisanal. Now I don't think that's quite the fad. So it's keeping up with whatever the fad is and whatever the market is. But I agree with what everyone said. If you provide information, quality information, there's a hunger out there for people to learn things and to read. Though I think Kindle's pretty seductive. It hasn't gotten the illustrations down yet.
No, well the color one is a little better for the illustrations.
So it sounds to me like whereas a generation ago or 2 generations ago there may have been 10 different paths you could go down if you were a student and you wanted to get in at the ground floor and try to get into publishing. Now maybe there's 50, maybe there's 150.
And you might not even think of them as publishing.
But let me ask you, if you're a student graduating and you want to have this notion you want to get into publishing, do you need to know what the specific niche is that you want to fill? How do you go about it?
I wouldn't say necessarily. I mean, I think a lesson to take away from this panel, just listening to everyone's background, nobody's doing what they started out doing. You know? So being versatile is I think very important. I never had an interest in home and design or architecture or interior design, or I could care less about what color pillow goes with what couch. I could still probably care less. Could not care less actually. Same with Rob. He was talking, as an MFA student. He lied and said, "Sure, I can do some survival manuals." I think, honing your craft and focusing on that, first, and making sure you're keeping up with your skills, and then keeping an open mind and letting kind of the the forces kind of push you and pull you into try out new things. If you have one idea of, I want to be the editor-in-chief of the New Yorker, well, you're going to have a lot of problems, and you're going to falter along the way. But if you say, I want to be a writer and I want to grow my career into a role as an editor, then just kind of you let it come and keep your ear open and try new things. And I feel like the talent you have in the industry will kind of pull you and push you along, and you end up doing something that maybe you didn't think you were going to be doing that, but you're kind of okay with it, and it's interesting, and it pays your bills, and allows you to have a life, I guess.
Yeah, that fluidity, I think, is really important. And growing up, I hunted and fished because we were poor. I didn't hunt and fish because I loved guns or because I loved fishing. It's just what you did where I grew up. And at no point when I was in the MFA program did I ever think, oh, I'm going to do this. But I was a journalist in the Navy for 8 years, which that is a propagandist. It's not actually journalism. We invade a third world country and then we'll write articles about how we, painted orphanages there. But all of this, I was editing all along. I edited for broadcast, I edited for print, I edited for a bi-monthly magazine for the Department of Defense, and it's always just sort of been there. So I think that as you're a student, there's two facets that you always have to be thinking of. One of them is, what do I do for me? And the other is, what's the practical application of it? I remember asking my mentor, Richard Bausch, one time, how do you make a living as a writer? He said, that's the wrong question to ask. You don't make a living as a writer, you write for a lifetime. And then you'll figure out how to make money at it. I fell into this because there was the very practical necessity of I needed to supplement my income. I just wasn't making enough money as a graduate student here, teaching 1 or 2 sections of English 1A or 1B as a teaching associate, or working in the writing center. I needed some way to make a little bit of extra income, and so there is that skill that I had of being an editor, and that was very practical. And when that opportunity arose, I said, absolutely, I can proofread a document. Any English major, I would argue that anyone, not even an English major, anyone with a communications background can probably proofread at a competent level that document, and you can make a decent supplemental paycheck that way. And then it's just sort of, this is not my full-time job. I have 2 part-time jobs. I teach here. I love to teach. Teaching is incredibly rewarding on a personal level and on a professional level. This is something I can make the same amount of money editing 2 to 3 titles a year that I make working full-time as a lecturer here at San Jose State. Put those 2 together, and suddenly I'm able to use the skills that I have doing what I enjoy doing, and I can make ends meet that way. And I continually meet new people. And the one thing that, to dovetail on that, is you're always meeting people. And you have no idea who you've already met, let alone who you are meeting. And it might not even come up that there's an opportunity there for, to write something, to publish something. And a year from now, that person will remember you, and it'll just fall into your lap. Literally, I woke up to an email saying, "You're the only person I know."
Luke.
That was it, right. You're the only person I know who owns guns, let alone knows how to use them. Can you do this? Yes, I can do that. And then it just, and then it just kind of becomes self-perpetuating. But you just have to be open. And I don't think you ever really have the luxury of saying no to an opportunity in publishing. Whether it's an unpaid internship, whether it's working, on a one-time project that's a 5 to 10 hour project for $20, do it. At the very least, you've just gotten gas money, which we're all kind of looking around for. I need gas money, so how do I get there? So yeah, that's my biggest advice is, there's a practical application to it. Don't say no when an opportunity comes, because even if it's small and you might be insulted by it, or I want to be the editor-in-chief of the New Yorker. I don't want to proofread your mail. That's what you have to do though. It's just,
Well, I want to take a slightly different view. and that is, don't put so much pressure on yourself. Don't think things through. Don't think things through. You're going to make all kinds of mistakes. You might as well get started making these mistakes. And you do, it is a lifestyle. Apologies to the word lifestyle, but you write because that's what you do. And you'll find these opportunities, and not everything will suit your aesthetic or suit your need. And people will use your talents and not pay you. So you've got to be careful of that. You can do a lot of work on the chance that you might get hired. They'll take the work and you won't get hired. So there has to be some sense of meetings of the minds where obviously at that pumpkin carving contest you understood each other. You know, you were.
Well, it came up from a silly story too. The very first private paid gig that I had as a writer was I posted an ad on Craigslist saying, "I'll write your letters for you." You know, and I said, "I'm an MFA student. I'll charge you. I'll charge you by the word." And and I had some guy who was so angry at his wife. They were going through a divorce. He said, "I just want you to write her the meanest, nastiest letter you can possibly write." And I said, "How long do you want that letter to be?" He said, 5 to 10 pages. And I said, "I charge $25 a page." He said, "Done." And I wrote him a 10-page letter. He paid me, $250. He said, "Can I come back anytime?" And so I would just go home, and I'd love it when I got an email from him. I wrote, I think, 3 letters for him. He said, "I want a letter telling off my boss. I want a letter telling off my wife." And done. And I would just go home and I'd channel all of that stuff that everybody who had pissed me off during the day. That was it. And so cranky Cyrano. So you never know where you're. And I did that as a lark. Someone had said, you write a really good letter. Go on Craigslist. I'm like, ha ha ha.
So you can make a difference.
But it really is kind of a matter of using the skills you've learned and your talents just in any place where you happen to find yourself. Like I took a job in comics because I was a student. I needed a job to pay some bills, and San Jose Slave Labor Graphics was right down the street from San Jose State. They needed an administrative assistant. So that's what I did, and I stayed there, and I found that I had an aptitude for it. And I was already interested in comics. But I mean, just based on working in comics, I've written book reviews for Publishers Weekly. I've written articles for Publishers Weekly. I was, an editor. I've written comics. I have a story coming out next month in an anthology called Womanthology, and and now I'm doing marketing. So you kind of find your community, and find how to use your skills wherever that happens to be.
So I'd like to open the floor now for some questions from the audience. Don't be shy, or this is a real generous group.
Do you guys offer any internships right now for students?
I'll take some.
Maybe. Right now we're in a tiny office where we're all kind of working like this, but we're moving into a bigger one. So I'm thinking of taking on a social media intern, because that is really important to marketing, and it takes up too much of my time that I need to devote to other things. So there's a possibility there.
What would a social media intern do?
I would probably just send them links of all the articles that are being published about our books and say, tweet this, put it on Facebook, make it interesting, put it some way where people will want to interact with the the content on our Facebook page or on our Twitter page or Tumblr, all the social media sites, Google Plus. It's just, there's a lot to do on that side.
Yeah, we would definitely take internships, as many as possible. I mean, we're like a startup, we're a startup to a startup, trying to do print publication in this kind of world, you know what I mean? But there is one thing I want to say. This is kind of and I'm a photographer, so, I love writers. I love the value of words and stuff like that. The thing I've just seen, though, is there's 2 types of writers, and this is what I would say There's journalists, no offense to anybody who might have been, and then there's writers, right? And what I've kind of seen is some San Jose State students that have come from the journalism department. They don't know how to tell a story. They don't know how to relate a feeling, an emotion, a scene. And so I would say if you're going to be a writer, then you have to learn how to convey a message and describe a room, and like this, some of the basic stuff I think that you get in elementary school. It's not, there's so much more than just facts. And for me, like, life is all about like the inspiration. You can have content and you can have information, but if there's not this other element where it pulls on the heartstrings, makes you think and makes you visualize, then it's useless. It's not a craft. It's words on the page. You know, it's like so I would say if you're in the journalism department, think of how you can become an artisan, you know, like a crafter, a wordsmith or whatever it is, rather than taking notes, you know? And for me, that's the things that we want to do. We want to celebrate the written word. We want to celebrate that communication. But it's a difficult, I mean, I think the writing is, as a photographer, it's great. You set up a picture, boom, you're done. Writing, there's such a birthing process to it that we want to celebrate that, we want to value that, we want to give credit to that. And I would say, though, as you're learning, then learn how to tell a story. And hopefully you read like the Dickens, you know what I mean? Because I've had some people come and want to do an internship, like, what do you read? And they're like, my friend's blog. And I'm like, oh, this conversation is over.
But don't completely discredit the journalism department.
Right, no. Yeah.
Because there is a formula to some of this stuff, and as you look at it, magazines all over the country, there is a basic formula to how they open a story, how they end with a kicker. You know,
Absolutely.
Wired magazine is obsessed with kickers. I don't get it. It's like this full circle thing every single time. It has to come from full circle writing, and you know, the reporting and picking out a good quote. These kinds of things that just breathe life into a story. You know, good storytelling is you know very valuable, and you need it. But you also need those skills if you're going to work in something like the mainstream publishing. You know, you can write short stories and stuff like that. There's different avenues for everything, but you know, if you have your sights set on writing for a big magazine, there is a formula to it, and you learn those formulas through departments that train you to do that, and those are journalism departments.
One question, follow-up question I have on the subject of internships is inspired by this television program on HBO called Girls. Have you guys seen this show? It's what this woman, Lena Dunham, is a 20-something-year-old liberal arts grad who started as making independent films on her own, and then HBO hired her to do this show. And it's about a bunch of recent college grads living in Brooklyn and the trials and tribulations that they go through. And it's a comedy, but it's very kind of verite also. And in the very first couple of episodes, there's this plot line where Lena Dunham has this internship, and she's been interning for this company. I think it's a small publisher or something, for like 9 months or something, and they still haven't paid her. And her parents come to New York to cut her off, basically, and to say, look, it's time for you to get paid for the work that you do. And she's like, you just don't understand. Things are different now. The economy's horrible. Everyone I know works for nothing, for no money. And you know, I was a recent college graduate in the late 90s, so it was a different time, and I don't feel like I'm especially qualified right now to say whether or not the times are different now, and that's just a function of the moment. But it seemed to me like she was being had, you know, or the character was. And I wanted to know what your thoughts are on that. Like,
9 months is a long time.
That's a long internship, yeah.
It shouldn't be longer than a semester. There was actually a New York Times investigation about this, of people being called interns, and basically they're slaves. I mean, they can leave anytime they want, but they're working for free, because technically when you're an intern, you can't be doing any work that directly leads to profit for the business. Right. So you can't be doing sales calls. You can't be, you know, packaging things that people are sending out to sell. you're supposed to be learning something. And a lot of times it's just like, I need an assistant, but I will call her an intern. And, you know, like...
Well,
yeah.
no one has, they always have interns. And the interns are paid. And they're not paid much. But every project there's a budget that's set for that project, this book. And that, it's sort of like a general fund. And out of that general fund, it's like, okay, we're going to pay our author this much plus royalties. We pay the project editor gets a flat fee per book, and you sign a contract for that. And on down to here's our layout and design budget. Most of the layout and design is contracted, but all of these books are layout and design driven.
Yeah.
And those layout and design editors a lot of times will have interns who are learning how to lay out and design in this particular field. There's buying the photographs is incredibly expensive, especially when you are publishing this kind of book at this kind of price and you're making that kind of a profit. It's complicated how much money a photographer will charge for a piece, and all the way down until we have an intern, and the intern will do anything from and I think that word assistant and internship is something you do have to be careful of. A lot of times you can find yourself unexpectedly in a position where you're not actually learning, you're just doing grunt work that nobody else wants to do. And that is part of the business. Unfortunately, there is sort of this hierarchy that you kind of have to fumble your way up. But you can do that, and you can still be in that environment, and you can learn an incredible amount. But our interns they're paid, and I think if you go in and you ask for an internship, I think almost every business will say absolutely. If you want to come in and be a hang around and learn what to do, and you're willing to kind of roll up your sleeves and pitch in, I think most people would say absolutely. I think you can probably make your internship just about anywhere you wanted to, in that sense.
The comics publishing industry has a pretty, at least in the DC and Marvel and Dark Horse, the bigger companies that have that structure where there's, assistant editors, senior editors, they have a pretty structured internship program where you can be a design intern, you can be an editorial intern, and you learn, and then if they want to hire you, you become an assistant editor. And those are the assistants who make copies and do all the grunt work. But, so yeah, if there's a structured kind of system like that, it's a little safer than just kind of showing up somewhere and saying, I want to be an intern, because some places don't really know what that is. They're not really set up to teach you anything.
Yeah, for us, exchange is credit through your department. I mean, we don't have funds to pay. And the whole idea is that it's building portfolio. I mean, I come from photographer kind of industry where you had to pay your dues. It was kind of like very much what you did, but it always is a connection into a different realm that ends up turning into money and
you're always
jobs.
Looking for that, how to fill out your resume. It's hard to, it's hard to find publishing credits. I mean, I'm an MFA. I'd rather be writing short stories. I'd rather be writing. I mean, I get a layout, and there are literally 4 blank boxes on that layout. Well, they're not blank. They have lorem ipsum text, which is just dummy Latin text. And you highlight that, and you do a word count, and it'll say 275 words. And your job is to write 275 words. Not 270, not 280, 275. And I'm a mechanic with words. That's really all I am. I'm not this is not writing. This is being an editor, and I'm constructing some specific words. But that is the doors that opens up for me, allows me to do the other things that I do want to do. I'm writing short stories. I can do the stuff that I want to do when I have time to do it. And this is the grunt work that allows me to do that.
Yeah, I transitioned from being an editorial to being in marketing, and I like it a lot better, because in editorial, you're using a lot of your own creative kind of thinking and energy, and you're putting it into helping other people realize their vision of their story. And you get kind of burnt out thinking like that, and you have no energy left over for your own stuff. So I've really liked the transition to marketing. It's just, I'm not trying to tell people how their story should be constructed or anything like that. I'm just putting things out there for people to know about.
More questions?
Well, actually, some of what you were saying leads me to the next question, which is, if in your work you're not doing exactly what you want to be doing, how much of your time do you actually get to spend doing what you would rather be writing?
It varies.
Okay.
It varies. When I am, right now, I'm on a, the other thing that you'll find out really quickly is the deadline never shifts, but the amount of time you have to get to that deadline will vary wildly. So the book that I'm working on right now is this fishing manual that was supposed to start in March. It started in August. I still have to have it all done by February. And that's not fair. And it's terrible. I was up until 1 o'clock this morning writing about methods to fish for pike in, I can't think of very many more, on just a word level, a more excruciating way to spend an evening than writing about pike. I've never seen a pike. I've never caught a pike. I don't ever want to catch a pike. It's cold and it's icy, and ice fishing seems just ridiculous to me. So obviously at that point, you know, when you're spending, I have 1 or 2 days a week that are devoted to writing and editing for this. And then I have 3 or 4 days a week that are devoted to grading papers and teaching classes. And that usually leaves you 1 or 2 days to sleep and eat pizza. And I'll be honest, I don't write nearly as much as I would like to write of my own material. That's just the reality. But what ends up happening is every now and then, you know, like you'll be on a panel here. You'll go someplace and you'll start talking to people, and you know you'll find yourself sitting next to someone who's editing a magazine, and you're like, oh, look, it's a magazine full of Studs Terkel approaches to interview. That's what I love to do. I can guarantee you before I leave here, I'm going to ask him if I can write for his magazine. Can I write for your magazine?
Yes,
see there? And that's and I will find time to do that because I can find a way to make it a requirement in my life. The larger projects that I would like to be spending time on, I can honestly say I'm not spending nearly the time that I'm wanting to do on that. But that will come at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I have a toddler, so I have a lot less time than I used to. But I also have a 45-minute commute on BART. And when I'm not falling asleep involuntarily, I use it to write my own stuff. So, you know, you just find...
Yeah, and I would say if y'all, I'm sure everybody in here has had a job before. These are all jobs, and you're going to have bad days, and it's going to suck, and you're going to hate your boss, and you're going to get depressed, and you're going to be like, why am I doing this? And you're going to go online, and you're going to start looking at MFA programs and dreaming, and, you know, picking up work on the side and looking at job boards, and then the next day you're like, yeah, this is pretty cool, I like my job. What was I complaining about? And I think one of the unexpected or overlooked things in the publishing industry is it's very manic, you know, depending on where you would work at a monthly or a quarterly, or you do a couple projects a year, or there's this, you know, up and down of, you know, towards the, I just went to print this morning, and the last few days have been just a nightmare, you know. I have a toddler as well, and I worked all weekend from home. At least I get to work from home, but now it's like today I'm taking the day off. I'm not going to do anything, you know. I need to get myself back together, and you know, just so I can get ready for that. In you know, 3 months from now, it's going to get crazy again. When I worked at monthly magazines, you know, when you're publishing, and during that week, it's crazy. You're fighting with your spouse. You're not doing laundry. You're not eating very well. I mean, it's just, you know, it's kind of manic. But then you pull through, and then you get in the groove, and that's just how it is. And you're gonna have to take those things in anywhere you work. You know. You're gonna have bad days, and it's gonna be hard. I mean, it's a job. Nobody wants to work. You know, I'd rather be at home watching The Walking Dead on the.
That's right. You and me both.
All day long. So.
You have a new Sunday fan panel right here.
So, you know, just don't say anybody.
And I tell all my students that, you know, you find out what you would do for free, and then figure out a way to make a living at it. You know, I'd write. If I wasn't doing this, I'd be reading and I'd be writing. I mean, that's what I spent all of my time on as a student. So all I've done is find a way to turn that into a paycheck. And yeah, sometimes you do feel like you're kind of you know, whoring yourself out there. But that's an unfortunate part of the business, and it is a job. You know?
And don't be so hard on yourself if you don't write personally for a week, 2 weeks. I'm a binge writer, you know.
Yeah.
I don't write for a long time, and you start thinking like, oh, somebody else out there is beating me, or I'm not being creative, or oh my God, I'm such a hack. And then you go through a period where you're just like, you know, you can't stay up long enough to get everything out, and everything's flowing, and you just produce all this great stuff, and you remember why you got into it in the first place, and then you might not do it for a while, or you go back to just living your life and enjoying it, and you know, if that's what you want to do, you're going to find time. And
yeah, it never goes away. It's always there. I mean, there's always something that you can write, and you know, you might not get to it that day, but I can guarantee you it'll be there. Yeah, your skills might be a little rusty, but it doesn't take long to knock the rust off of them.
Well, I think we're out of time, so I wanted to thank you all sincerely for coming down here today. This was a really wonderful panel. I could listen to you guys talk all day. I mean, that's it. I don't know about The Walking Dead, but I'd like to just sit here and listen to you guys talk.
Well, we can talk about The Walking Dead. I can tell you that right now, because Sunday's episode killed me.
I haven't watched it yet.
And because this is a publishing panel, there's swag for everyone.
And there will be comics. I forgot them, but I'm going to send
She's
them
going to
to
bring
Nick.
some in.
And he'll give them to people.
I'll put them in the student life.
Yeah.
And a round of applause. Thank you.
I don't have any cards, but if anybody